What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We are finally here. We had some real games last night. What a great game. But I'm stoked to have Andy back for our first season on my channel of Flex Friday. This week, we tell you who to start at your flex position if you need some help. Andy, welcome in today, buddy.
Thanks for having me, my man. We're back in the old me in a hotel room doing our Flex Friday. You know, it feels like football season's really here.
If anyone happened to check us out last year over on the Dynasty Pros channel, we did Flex Friday every single week last year. And basically, Andy was in a different hotel every single week due to his work. So we really appreciate Andy coming out. So we're going to let Andy get us kicked off today. Keep in mind, these are players to start in your flex position. Maybe sometimes these could be RB2, wide receiver 3 types. Or if you went with like a really RB heavy build, wide receiver heavy build, maybe you are having to start these guys. But obviously there are going to be, 20 something players at each position. We're probably still playing over these guys. These are once you start getting a little deeper onto your roster. But Andy, kick us off with your number one player for Flex Friday this week.
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to my man, Tyjae Spears. And, kind of like you said, at this point, you just drafted your team. You're probably playing a lot of the guys that you drafted in order. But for instance, for me, I went 0 RB in one of my drafts, and I am loving that I have Tyjae Spears to play this week. Last year, the Bears were 32nd in DVOA versus the running backs. So they allowed 60 yards per game and 8 catches per game to the running back position, which was the most in the league. And Tyjae Spears had, I think it was 50 some receptions last year with Derrick Henry in an offense that ran the ball, nearly 50% of the time. So we're getting this offense coming in from Kansas City who are way higher in pass rate. I think Spears is going to be the primary pass catcher out of that backfield. So even though there's a good chance it's going to be a 50-50 timeshare, at least to start, we'll see how that breaks down. I think Spears is going to get the more valuable touches. He's going to get more of those targets, more of those receptions. And this is the perfect defense for him to be able to thrive.
Yeah, I mean, with Tyjae Spears, the Titans are not favored in their game against the Bears. Not that we think the Bears are going to blow them out or anything, but they're probably going to have to score some points. And just like you said, I've been a huge Tyjae Spears fan for a long time, and pass catching touches are just more valuable than rushes when it comes down to it. So my first guy of the week is going to be a running back, and this may be actually one of the few players where I may say I might deviate from a guy and play Jerome Ford, even though I drafted him after someone else, where in general, I'm playing just the guys I drafted first. I'm not getting too cute. Week 1, I don't really think we know too much about the defenses as much as we want to assume and project. I think you just play your guys. But Jerome Ford may be one of those guys where, let's say you drafted a Trey Benson or a Jonathan Brooks before Jerome Ford, but you snagged Jerome Ford to play him until Nick Chubb comes back. I'm feeling pretty great about playing Ford this week. He was a very consistent starter last year. Basically the epitome of an RB2 for your fantasy team last year. I literally remember looking at his game log, and he had the same amount of points like 3 weeks in a row, and it was to the decimal. It wasn't some like full number. It was to the decimal, and that number was like 12 point something. And you're like, you know what? If I'm getting 12 points from Jerome Ford, I'm happy to slot him as my RB2, my flex position. Obviously going against the Cowboys. Good pass rush, from what we do know from last year. Micah Parsons is still there. They're going to target Ford, and I don't like to be one of those guys that just assumes backfield touches for a player, but let's be realistic about the Browns' backfield. They don't really have much there. Pierre Strong, Donta Foreman may work in a little bit until Nick Chubb comes back, but in general, I'd expect the Browns to go a little pass happy, and Jerome Ford showed that he can make some big plays, and he was a good pass catcher last season.
No, and I agree with a lot of what you said there. I mean, I think one of the big reasons why Ford and some of these other running backs we're going a little bit later is because there is a starter on that team, but they're injured. And so these weeks when they're not there, these are great starts. I think Ford was RB23 from week 2 on. So, I mean, like you said, he is just a solid, just running back 2. That's what he's going to give you. But, there's also a chance that, he could get in the end zone a couple times. The Browns like to run near the goal line. So I think it's a solid play.
So next is going to be a wide receiver from Andy, a guy we've talked about as a potential breakout this year as well. But why week 1 for JSN?
So there's a few reasons. And kind of like you said, at this point, we don't have this year's, stats on how defenses are. And defenses do change a lot over the years. But last year, Denver was 32nd DVOA versus wide receiver 2s. Lockett still limited at practice. And even if he plays, I don't think he's going to get, that same snap share where he's just out there on every play. I think that they'll have to put JSN in some 2 wide receiver sets. We're getting a new offense here. And JSN started camp last year injured with a broken wrist. He missed a lot of training camp. Took him a while to get acclimated coming back from his injury. And I think with a full year, we might really be able to see why he was the first wide receiver drafted off the board. I think this is going to be a defense where, they have such a good corner on one side that, maybe it's not a big game for DK, but there should be some opportunities for JSN. And so I think if he is as talented a player as a lot of us think he is, that he should be able to, really get involved in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, it works out pretty well for JSN this week. Like you said, with Surtain there in Denver. I mean, either JSN's going to be in the slot and Surtain's probably not going to move inside on him. Or in 2 wide receiver sets, if JSN gets some snaps over Lockett, Surtain's most likely going to be on DK anyway. So I think this offense is just going to look a little different this year. I think they're going to run more 3 wide. I think they're going to pass the ball a little more than they have in the past. And, home game, Seattle week 1, banged up Tyler Lockett. These are the things. It's like if you're drafting Jerome Ford, if you're drafting JSN and you're not trusting them in these situations, like, why did you draft this guy? I mean, that's kind of the point. If you drafted Jerome Ford, like, you drafted him to play him early in the season. If you drafted JSN, you want and hope this dude breaks out because Tyler Lockett's going to come on slow this year. So I'm with you on JSN here. Next one for me is going to be a wide receiver. This guy's kind of right on that edge as well. Chris Godwin, just a good matchup. We don't fully know, but Washington is not some team that I would expect this monster season from. They're in a sort of rebuild, new coach, rookie quarterback. And, I think this is a really good matchup for the Tampa Bay passing game. I think Godwin's going to kind of look to return to his role from a couple years ago with a slight scheme change there in Tampa Bay. So I think, obviously I'd play Mike Evans over Chris Godwin, but Mike Evans was going in the 3rd. You were getting Godwin in the 7th, 8th round. So I feel good about playing Chris Godwin in my flex position this week.
No, I do too, especially against this Commanders team. They were 32nd DVOA versus the pass last year. And, looking at a lot of their moves in the draft, they went pretty heavy to try and revamp this offense. In free agency, there's a lot of depth defensive pieces that were added, but, I don't think that this defense is going to be a top 10 unit in the NFL by any means. And Godwin is still a very talented wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, the defense of Washington, like we say a bunch, like, yes, I don't like to assume anything without kind of using information and watching the games this year, but they were the worst defense last year.
Exactly.
So even an improvement probably finds them more in the middle of the pack. They're not going to be this top 3 passing defense all of a sudden this year. So moving on to our next player, Andy, coming at you with one of our favorite guys this year. Andy, Jayden Reed. Why this week specifically, though?
Well, I mean, going back off of last year, which at this point, really the only stuff we have, Philly, 29th versus wide receiver 3s, 26th versus wide receiver 2s. In this Packers offense, we really don't know who the 1, the 2, the 3 is. However, Jayden Reed probably going to run a lot out of the slot and 3 personnel. He'll probably get on the field sometimes in wide receiver 2 sets. He had 10 touchdowns last year. He's going into his sophomore season. We've got a number of rookie corners for the Eagles who I think could be good, but coming out week 1 in their first start, I love targeting defenses who are relying on rookie corners. I think Jaden Reed is the most well-rounded wide receiver on this Packers team, and they're going to get him touches. They like to manufacture things for him. So I think this is a great week to throw him in your lineup tonight. But
yeah, tonight.
And if you are playing him, even though this is a flex Friday, put him in your wide receiver spot just in case something happens with one of your other guys down the line. You have more options to pivot. So even though he is your flex player, play him at wide receiver.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think your point of Philly maybe playing some rookies in the secondary is something that us as fantasy football players need to take into account. I mean, let's look at the game last night with, it wasn't in a fantasy sense, but what did the Chiefs do on defense? They put Chris Jones on the inexperienced rookies on the Baltimore line.
Yeah.
These defensive coordinators, yes, they're super smart. They do these really, technical and advanced things, but sometimes it is as simple as the quarterback or the defensive coordinator just being like, oh, my really good player is being guarded by a rookie right now. I like that matchup. And it's not that crazy to think that there's probably going to be 1 to 2 more catches for Jaden Reed just because of that fact that if he gets lined up by someone on Philly in the secondary, they're probably going to look at him before the play even starts as the potential for a big play. So my last flex player before we get into our streamers of this week, it's going to be Jerome Ford Jr., whatever you want to call him, Chuba Hubbard, same exact position as Jerome Ford here. I have a bunch of Jerome Ford and Chuba Hubbard on my teams if I went a little hero RB, a little zero RB. And it's just because I think the starter week 12 on these teams is currently hurt. Jonathan Brooks, Nick Chubb, Chuba Hubbard, or as my coworker calls him, Chubba Hubbard. I like Chubba more than Chuba, honestly. But, good old Chuba, the thing is he looked pretty good in the preseason. I think Chuba showed last year that he could be a good running back. I don't think he's some great talent, but I think he's a good player. He won the role last year in that backfield. Yes, a lot less competition. All he had to do was beat out our boy Miles Sanders, the richest backup running back in the NFL right now, whatever you want to call him. But, they're going up against the Saints. I think the Panthers are going to be a little better this year than people think. I really like all the offseason changes. I love Canales coming over, led to a very not efficient, but a very fantasy productive Rachaad White season last year. And when it comes down to it, I think this is going to be a close game. I really don't see the Saints blowing out a bunch of teams. So Chuba's going to be involved, and I like playing him in my flex if I'm going with more of a safer route, right? That's something that Andy and I last year would always talk about is some of these players are riskier upside plays, and some of these guys are more floor baseline plays. And I really truthfully believe the flex position is about looking at the rest of your lineup and kind of seeing what you need out of the flex position. I mean, just taking the guys we've spoke about today, I think Chuba, Spears, Jerome Ford, more floor guys. I think they're going to get you 8 to 12 points, and I'd feel really good about it if I have some spikier big play wide receivers. But, if you went up against Xavier Worthy or Likely last night, I'm probably leaving JSN or Jaden Reed and hoping I can get, 15 to 20 points out of my flex position. But moving on to our streamers, basically, if you haven't been to the channel, or this is our first week on my channel of Flex Friday, Andy and I are each going to give you 3 flex players. Then we're going to give you a QB and a tight end streamer. These are not going to be guys that were drafted as top 12, probably not even top 14, 15 players at their position. We're trying to go a little deeper, maybe even guys you could pick up off the waiver wire and start. So Andy, Baker Mayfield coming off a big year last year. Why do you like him week 1?
Well, a lot of the reasons why we like Chris Godwin this week is that we think the Commanders' defense is going to be susceptible to the pass. He still has Mike Evans. He still has Chris Godwin. They draft is it not Jaleel
Bucky?
Yeah, well, not Bucky, but who's the McMillan?
Oh yeah, McMillan.
So yeah, so they added another pass catcher there too. Baker, especially against bad defenses, my poor Packers, Baker was the only quarterback to go into Lambeau and have a perfect passer rating. And last year, the Commanders defense was even worse than the Packers pass defense. So, I think they're going to be able to put up quite a bit of points on this team. And I think you could definitely do worse than Baker. You could also do better if you drafted a quarterback higher. So, think about it. This is really for a league where maybe it's one of your home leagues where we're waiting on quarterback. People were drafting them early, and then they started drafting backups, which definitely happens in a lot of leagues at the quarterback and the tight end position, which then usually means the rest of your roster is stacked. And if you're playing Baker at quarterback, you probably have some great wide receivers and running backs.
Yeah, I think Baker's a great play here. Obviously, you went Baker, I went Godwin. I didn't choose Cade Otton for my tight end stream, but I was going to until I decided to not go all in on the Buccaneers because I wanted to spread out some of our picks. But I just think it's a good game to target if you're looking for some streaming options. Or these days, I think streaming quarterback could really almost be, quarterback 2 in a super flex league. I think you could really kind of mix and match those guys in a 2 QB league. If you're rostering 3 quarterbacks and you're deciding between Derek Carr and Baker Mayfield, we're saying Baker Mayfield this week. We like the matchup a lot more. My streaming guy of this week, Matthew Stafford. I really like the matchup he has this week. Obviously, Detroit's a very good team, a pretty good defense. It's going to be in Detroit, but that's an inside game. It's got a very big over-under, and when it comes down to it, I think the Rams are going to have to score some points. We obviously love their receiving options. Both of their top receivers going in the top 36 picks. I mean, Puka going round 1-2 turn, Kupp going in the 3rd in a lot of leagues. So when it comes down to it, I think the Rams are going to throw. I think they're going to have to keep up with Detroit, and this is a boomier pick for sure. If I'm playing Stafford, I think there's a chance for a 3-touchdown, 300-yard game. Obviously, the touchdowns could go a different direction, a lot tougher to project.
No, I love this. Stafford coming back to Detroit again. We'll see if those Rams can avenge their playoff loss last year. So love the narrative side of it. And then, also something sneaky to think about is the Rams will be without Aaron Donald. What will their defense look like this year? And will they have to put up more points to try and stay in these games? Will they have to throw a little bit more, be coming from behind, which is going to be great for these wide receivers and great for Matt Stafford?
Yeah, so moving on to our tight ends. Andy gave me his picks before I selected mine. He sniped me on the tight end pick. I was talking about this guy as a guy to add, but Andy, Taysom Hill, I mean, he's the guy. He's the guy.
Yeah, he's the guy. Dennis Allen absolutely loves him. You hear him talk about Taysom Hill and you hear him talk about Kendre Miller. It is hilarious how different his tone is. If you can play him at tight end, he's a guy who has the chance to get, goal line carries. He's, going to potentially get, a couple touches at quarterback. Like, they like to move him all around. He's their Swiss Army knife on that team. And I think they're going to involve him in this offense. Carolina was 29th versus the tight end last year. So this is a great matchup for tight ends. At least it was last year. So I think you could do a lot worse than Taysom Hill if you're looking to stream somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to really repeat too much what Andy said. I literally just talked about Taysom Hill in a video the other day. And what I said is, hey, in our leagues, we don't really allow people to play Taysom Hill. But if there's no rule, I want this dude on my team because it's kind of a cheat code. And he's the best late round tight end there is if you can pick him up. He gets the weirdest spike week games in a position that really doesn't bring that into the fold too much. So I like Taysom Hill. If you're looking for a streamer, if you went TJ Hawkinson and you're like, who do I start this week? Taysom Hill's your guy. And my deep tight end pickup would be Hunter Henry. I just think when it comes down to it, we don't really know who the pass catchers are going to be for New England. Is it going to be Pop Douglas? Are the rookies going to show? Is KJ Osborne? I mean, I really don't feel great about much of them. And so I think Hunter Henry is just going to be sitting there. And, he was better than you thought last year. He was better than you thought a couple years ago. And if I'm looking for someone that has TD upside in a game script that they're going to have to probably play catch up, Bengals, last time I checked, were an 8-point favorite. So New England's going to have to throw the ball to keep up with Cincinnati. And, I could see Jacoby Brissett, man. He's a veteran. This dude's going to look to get the ball out, and he's probably going to lean more on some of these veteran players like Hunter Henry than he's going to, I don't think any of us really expect Jalen Polk to come out and just be this wide receiver one right away. So I'd expect a lot of Pop Douglas. I'd expect a lot of Hunter Henry and Ramondre Stevenson for the New England offense, and they're going to be throwing the ball.
No, I agree. And, Hunter Henry started off red hot last year. So maybe that's just his thing. He was the tight end 1 week 1 and the tight end 2 week 2. So, that could also, I don't know if that really factors into it, but, if you started him week 1 last year, congratulations, you played the tight end 1. So.
Yeah, and I mean, you're going to seem real smart if you play Hunter Henry over someone. If you just have this gut feeling, you're like, dude, Hunter Henry over Mark Andrews. I just feel it this week. I just absolutely feel it. But thank you guys for tuning into the channel. Our first Flex Friday. We're going to be doing this every single Friday all year. So Friday morning, man, set your notifications, come to the channel, take a peek. If you have any questions about some flex guys we did not talk about, hit us up in the comments below. Both of our Twitters are on the screen. We would both gladly talk to you guys about your flex players. But Andy, thanks for joining me, brother. And we will get you back on the channel next week, Flex Friday, guys. Good luck this weekend. Good luck tonight. Good luck Monday. Best week of the year. So we will see you guys later.